If you take bio or AP bio, you will know that it's really hard to study because there's so much content to cover. I've got 3 easy ways to make notes to study for your finals and for any test. If you're going to be studying things like processes, they need to be one after another, use a flow diagram. Essentially, it is a diagram that uses ideas connected with arrows. If you need to remember a lot of terminology and definitions, then use flashcards. The definition's on the one side and the explanation or the answer is on the other side. The third study technique is using a mnemonic. A mnemonic is when you take the first letter of every word in the list you must remember in a specific order and making some kind of funny story to remember the first letter. Each letter represents a step in your story.
Always go down on them. A concentration gradient, don't get it twisted. 60 seconds biology tips, how to get an A, here we go. So now that we got the joke out of the way. Biology, a lot of memorization, it's terms, it's a language. If I was an enzyme, I'd be helicase so I can unzip your genes. I get the jokes, gotta know the language, bada bing, bada boom. So how do you learn terminology well, Jackie? You just do it. No, seriously. Usually the day before class, I'd go through the PowerPoint and the textbook. What's important is making sure that you pause when you don't know a term. And if you see it coming up a lot, make a note about it. In college, the classes move very quickly, so you won't have time to pull out your phone and look up a definition. So if you go into class already knowing a bit about the chapter and the language, it's going to be much easier. And this goes for every class, but especially biology. And I got an itch. So let's take an example. Let's say you're learning about genetic recombination. So you're learning about viruses, eukaryotes, prokaryotes. You want to pay attention to the basic terminology that goes along with it. So like for viruses, it'd be like envelope and capsid. Like with bacteriophage, knowing the difference between lytic and lysogenic. Not only does this help you focus more because you know what's going on, but also you're hearing it for the second time now. So now you can really pay attention to what the teacher's stories are and how they're connecting it. People will be handing out notes left and right, but let me show you how you actually should take notes.
So there's an art to taking notes, and I'm going to show you how so you're not just copying the textbook. This is what I did in all my STEM pre-med classes to get an A.
I'm going to take you through this process, give you an example, and fill in the rest.
Again, let's do this through an example. So you've listened to the PowerPoint in class, and you know what chapters it covers, so what do you do next? Let's break down the textbook because I know it can be really overwhelming. Wait, I need my beats. Now, if you've been on my account before, you know how important it is to read the textbook. Hopefully you'll fall in love with them one day. First thing you do is you take the PowerPoint and you pull out those key questions. You write it down on a piece of paper. You go to the beginning of the chapter and you write down those key questions as well. Every textbook has this, either at the front page or the end of the chapter. So what do you do next, Jackie?
You wrote down your questions, now we're on part 2.
See these 2 things? Just a pen and a paper? That's all you need for step 2. I swear the worst thing people can do is read the textbook and take extensive notes the first time they read it. How can you possibly dive into the information and get a big picture? So the first time you go through the chapter, you're only going to use a pen and paper. What are you going to use a pen and paper for, Jackie? 3 things. 1, write down the words you don't know and look them up. 2, the sections that make your head explode, because you're going to keep reading. Number 3, points that remind you about another topic or another class. An example is like if you're doing biochem, you might write down, IUPAC, carbohydrates. Glycolysis, I might want to know the mechanisms from Orgo.
Okay, now we're on part 3. How do you actually take these notes?
Okay, this part's exciting. Let me read through the button. So now that you have your question sheet, you're ready to go. So usually the textbooks break it up by topic, or they'll be like 1.1, 1.2.
So this is where it gets funky. We're going to break it down like a song. So you got the main part, you got the chorus, you can improvise, and you got the bass. So now you think that I'm crazy. So let us walk through this example.
You're on 1.1, you're going to sit down and read that again. Now, not looking, you're going to write a 1-sentence summary. This should be quick now. Now we start with the main line, which is the question. Again, if you're just writing line by line, you're not actually putting it into the big picture. So let's say you're learning about fluid balance, osmotic, and hydrostatic pressure. You find the question from the PowerPoint or the key points from the textbook and write that down. Now you're going to pick the key picture in the textbook and build around that.
So this is an example of a diagram I found in this section.
So now you're at the course theme. So what are you actually dealing with? Well, you're looking at veins, capillaries, arteries. Write it down.
So now you go in and you fill in a little bit about the arteries and the veins. This is where study sheets become a little bit like a puzzle. For example, if you're looking at this graph with velocity of blood flow and comparing it to arteries and veins, it's important to know, well, what are they composed of in order for you to understand what's driving this mechanism? So we're going to come to the improvise at the end. Okay, now this is my favorite part. The why are you doing this? What's going on?
If you're making a study sheet, it better have parts that are different from the textbook. I'm telling you right now. If you're just copying the textbook, then you're not really thinking through it. So now we get to the base, and this is the why. So you write down on a piece of paper, physics, chemistry, biochem, orgo. You figure out what parts of those classes integrate in what you're learning. Like, yeah, that's crazy, Jackie. What do you mean? You're going to do extra work? First of all, this is what puts it all together, and usually teachers mention this in class. Students are like, that's not important. So let me write a bunch of examples so you see how this happens.
So for this topic, physics is what comes to mind. Circuits in parallel, series, Bernoulli's law, understanding how this connection of fluid and physiology relates to what you're learning. That's what helps you understand. Let me give you some more examples. As you dive deeper and start to connect other topics, you see how the whole picture comes together. Another quick example is neurons. These are the physics equations you would relate to. In the textbook, they're usually referring to it. You just gotta pay attention. Last but not least, improvise, add a fun
obsessed with you in a way I can't believe. When you wipe your tears, do you wipe them just for me? Do you wipe them just for me? I'm pleading on my knees. It's your touch that I need.
Baby girl, I'm the man from the big B.A. Won't you come play round my way? And listen to what I gotta say.